They've stood at the front lines of law, leadership, and public service. Attorney Karen Jimeno, sharp, steady, a lawyer, an educator, turns complex issues into clear insight. Attorney Mike Toledo, seasoned, fearless, a strategist and communicator whose voice has shaped public understanding of law and governance. Together, they make the law accessible, connecting principles with real-life questions, confronting the issues that define our nation. This is Abogado.
Good evening and welcome to Abogado, where we examine how the law reaches across borders and the limits it must respect along the way. I'm Attorney Mike Toledo.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Tonight, a take on a case that has placed Philippine law at the edge of its own borders and tested what accountability means when the usual tools don't apply. Let's take a closer look.
After months in hiding, a fugitive is finally in custody. Former ACO Bicol Representative Zaldy Co, arrested in Prague, thousands of miles from the tribunals waiting to try him. But arresting Zaldy Co is one thing, bringing him home is another. The Philippines has no extradition treaty with the Czech Republic. Reports suggest Co may hold a Portuguese passport and he still has the right to seek asylum. Is the answer deportation, extradition by comedy, or the UN Convention Against Corruption? Tonight, we confront a question that tests the reach of Philippine law beyond its borders. Can the Philippines bring Zaldy Co home without an extradition treaty?
Joining us tonight is Attorney Rodel Taton, Dean of the Graduate School of Law at San Sebastian College-Recoletos. A recognized authority of international law, Dean Taton is the founder and managing partner of Taton Law. He is frequently consulted by media for geopolitical and extradition and asylum issues.
Also with us tonight is Attorney Danielito DJ Jimenez, the creator of the Pinoy Street Lawyer, a pioneering legal education platform that brings the law closer to the public. A seasoned trial lawyer and law professor at the University of Santo Tomas, Attorney DJ previously served as a consultant to the National Security Advisor. Attorneys, good evening and welcome to both of you here in Abogado.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mike and Karen.
And very timely discussion, no? Kasi ang dami rin nagtatanong sa akin, ano na mangyayari ngayon? Paano daw iuwi si former Congressman Zaldy Co? So, attorneys, to keep our discussion clear and focused, let's first review how we've structured tonight's program.
We begin with the opening statements. Each guest delivers a focused 2-minute statement, laying out their perspective on the proposition. The conversation then unfolds through 2 key subtopics. For each subtopic, the guests take turns presenting their insights in 2-minute segments. Even if they share the same stand, they are encouraged to highlight different angles, supporting arguments, or real-world applications. After both have spoken, we move into the open exchange, a 6-minute free-flowing discussion where the guests engage each other directly, ask questions, and expand on their points. Once both subtopics have been explored, we proceed to closing reflections, where each guest is given 2 minutes to summarize their key messages. Finally, the hosts step in with their own questions. In this 6-minute segment, the guests respond, clarify, and deepen the discussion, ensuring critical issues are surfaced, even if the guests are aligned in position.
And now let's begin with opening perspectives. On April 16, Zaldy Co was arrested in Prague after crossing into the Czech Republic without proper documentation. He faces graft and malversation charges before the Sandigan Bayan here in the Philippines. While the country requested an Interpol red notice against him in November 2025 over these corruption allegations, The notice was still under review by Interpol headquarters at the time of his arrest. So now, Dean Taton, from your perspective, what is the correct legal framework to bring home Zaldy Co? And what must the Philippine government do? Right from the start, what would be the right thing for them to do to ensure that he can be brought home as soon as possible? You have 2 minutes.
Yes, bringing him home is one of the loudest calls here today. And I really think that the right thing to do for the Philippines is to really go diplomatic route if we really wanted it to be faster. And it will be directly with the Czech Republic. And if we look at the timelines for Zaldy Co, from the time that he left the Philippines up to the time that he was allegedly arrested and detained in the Czech Republic, there are so many things there that we can really see, no? That he is still a Filipino citizen, although there are stories that come out that he possesses a golden visa or citizenship from Portugal, but it's quite impossible in the border. If he does possess this, he could have presented these documents at the borders. But no, he did not, and he is being accused of violation of the immigration laws, particularly not possessing of documents for travel there in the EU. And I really think that if we follow the deportation route and all the other routes, it can be in a longer period of time. Unlike if we go into the diplomatic route where the Philippines use a negotiation table and discuss with them the possibility of returning Zaldy Co to the Philippines, just like what happened with some famous fugitives from justice also here in the Philippines lately. We have Teves, Go, and I think this could be the right route as of this time.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dean Tato. Attorney DJ, from your perspective, what legal tools are already on the table and how should the government use them?
At the onset, the government not only can the government bring Zaldy Co back to the Philippines, but it actually should bring him legally and even morally. On a moral perspective, Zaldy Co holds the key to many unanswered questions. No? On the legal perspective, we have basically two legal remedies. One is what we refer to as an administrative remedy of deporting him through administrative and diplomatic channels, and the other one could be judicial under the principle of comity. Even if there is no extradition treaty, the government can simply negotiate also with the Czech Republic to bring him back. But I think right now, the government should have already learned from the Guho route and the Teves route, which both were based on administrative, which is deportation. If you recall, in the case of Teves, there was an extradition process that that was explored. Yet the courts in Timor-Leste prevented Teves from coming back. But through the administrative channels, through the government of Timor-Leste, they invoked the administrative process because Teves remained as an undocumented alien. Now, they can also apply the same, and that is also what had happened to Guo. She was caught in the ASEAN without papers. She was also an undocumented alien, so she was deported. However, I think the government should act fast. Why? Because if Portugal will later on claim that he is our citizen, then that complicates the
And there we really have some unanswered questions, no? Kasi like Dean Taton said, yung balita na merong Portuguese passport
Golden visa.
Zaldy Co.
Yes.
Mukhang hindi totoo because then why was he undocumented when he tried to cross to
Correct.
the Czech Republic?
In fact, partner, before we go on a break, it raises also the question, if you knew you didn't have the proper documentation,
Why
did you
try?
cross? Why did you try?
Baka sinasadya.
Were you compelled or was this done on purpose? Kaya the first thing that entered my mind, crossing, knowing fully well that you're not properly documented, that you will definitely be apprehended. Why? Ano yung rason? Ano yung agenda? Ano yung hindi natin nakikita?
Kaya lang parang di ba't mas hero siya kung umuwi na lang siya ng kusa, di ba?
Yes.
So talagang maraming unanswered questions also. So
Yes.
this is going to be an interesting discussion.
Indeed.
When we return, we examine the legal tracks that may be available to the government. Deportation, extradition, and mutual legal assistance under United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Which of these best serves the rule of law and not merely the rule of expedience? You're watching Abogado.
After months in hiding, a fugitive is finally in custody. Former ACO Bicol representative Zaldy Co, arrested in Prague, thousands of miles from the tribunals waiting to try him. But arresting Zaldy Co is one thing, bringing him home is another. The Philippines has no extradition treaty with the Czech Republic. Reports suggest Co may hold a Portuguese passport and he still has the right to seek asylum. Is the answer deportation, extradition by comedy, or the UN Convention Against Corruption? Tonight, we confront a question that tests the reach of Philippine law beyond its borders. Can the Philippines bring Zaldy Co home without an extradition treaty?
Welcome back. You're still watching Abogado. Can the Philippines bring Zaldy Co home without an extradition treaty? Helping us navigate this question are Dean Rodel Taton and Attorney DJ Jimenez.
Now, in the absence of a bilateral treaty, the government is weighing at least 3 tracks: deportation under Czech immigration law, extradition or surrender based on comity, reciprocity and Interpol protocol, and mutual legal assistance under the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, to which both states are parties. Now, Dean Taton, without a bilateral treaty, what is the primary and most viable route to bring Zaldy Co back to the Philippines as soon as possible?
If you refer to the bilateral treaty on extradition, we don't have that. But
Okay.
we have the Interpol organization where the Philippines is a member of, which is also a treaty. And also we have the UN Convention on, Anti-Corruption Convention, which we are also a member to that treaty. So these particular routes on cooperation and agreement by the Philippines and Czech Republic, this could be the most efficient and expedient manner to return Zaldy Co home. And I really think that these processes will also observe the rights, of course, of Zaldy Co. At the same time, the rights of the government in fighting against corruption with the malversation and corruption charges against Zaldy Co.
Thank you so much, Dean Taton. Attorney DJ, why is it important to know that the arrest of Zaldy Co was due to an immigration violation and not due to an Interpol red notice?
Well, in the first place, just to be clear, although as correctly pointed out by Dean Taton, who incidentally was my chairman during my dissertation in the USC Graduate School of Law,
Hindi kita pinarapan doon,
yun pong Interpol, they don't arrest. The Interpol and those other conventions, they may be utilized as basis for mutual cooperation for under the principle of comity, but it will take a longer process because that is subject to due process. Unlike if we take the route of an administrative remedy, which is simple deportation, if you're a foreigner, it is within the power of a foreign state to kick you out of their jurisdiction. Wala nang due process.
And it's unilateral in
And it's
nature.
unilateral.
But
So
I
parang
don't agree.
ginagawa ni President Trump sa United States when he started deporting what he called undocumented or illegal immigrants. Parang ganon, mabilis
But
lang.
I don't agree with Attorney the Mr. Street lawyer here when he said that wala nang due process yon kasi sa deportation, although it is unilateral on the part of
Yeah,
the Czech
yes,
Republic, but there must be observance of due process
Yeah,
still.
human rights pa rin,
And
human
remember
rights.
that they are at the European Union area, and the human rights protection and advocacy there is very strong as well. So that's why Czech Republic is very careful in dealing with this high-profile fugitive from justice also because the world is looking at them. And the European Union and the Human Rights Council there, I mean, human rights people are really observing also. That's why here we are weighing on how they will deal with this high-profile detainee when the world is watching them.
So, Dean, you're saying that when it comes to due process
so, just to,
in SEC,
you
it's
can,
longer?
Yeah, so before you answer that question, Dean Taton, will let you ask the question, Attorney DJ, but officially, because may timer tayo, we'll open the floor to the open discussion. Kasi
Yes,
we
yes.
have 6 minutes for this. So
Yes, yes.
we'll start with your question, Attorney DJ.
Okay. While Dean Taton said that we do observe still due process when it comes to deportation, I would take the position that it would still be a faster route compared to negotiating for the surrender. I would think that deportation, if SEC would really insist on deporting Zaldy Co, and Zaldy Co can always challenge that in court, Czech Republic right to deport him, I think, stands on a higher ground, rather than there would still be negotiation for a temporary executive agreement between Czech Republic and the Philippines. Because we saw that in the cases of Go and Tebes.
But it was
That's my only
faster.
basis.
I think it was faster as compared to going to the deportation framework where the person is to be brought to the authorities in Czech Republic, which means that he will also have the opportunity to question that. And in fact, if his allegations will be correct, he can always claim that he is being persecuted, and this unfounded fear that the Philippines is doing against him can raise an asylum protection. I mean, which could suspend the deportation process, which could even be longer.
And the other thing is, ang nakakalito lang, meron kasing mga statements that Zaldy Co was not arrested in the Czech Republic. Yeah. So, kung ganun ba, will that make a difference in terms of our ability to deport him?
Although sinasabi nga nila na walang questionable ang konsepto ng arresto or arrest, pero the thing is, it's very clear that he's being detained there. The detention may be because of he is an undocumented alien, no? So kung wala siyang dokumento na ipapakita, is still liable under the immigration laws of Czech Republic, and one
Recourse there is for him to be deported, which is a unilateral act coming from the Czech Republic.
Whether the United Nations Convention on Anti-Corruption, Article 44, Section 5, is something that can apply in place of an extradition treaty is an open question. Can that supplement the ability of the Philippines to bring him back
I
here?
think definitely anything goes when it comes to possible temporary agreement between two nations. So, lahat naman yan pwede. I would think so.
I think this negotiation and agreement based on the that convention, no, and even under any other cooperation agreements, one thing is clear here, that through cooperation, the two states can always come up with a new agreement or purposely for Zaldy Co only.
So,
But that would still be subject to requirements of dual criminality, like any other extradition treaty. It could be
Yes,
challenged.
but for this cooperation agreement, I don't think that the concepts like specialty, double criminality, and all that under the extradition
Maybe
treaties
dispensed
will
with.
not apply because we are not looking at an extradition here, but based on cooperation agreement based on the treaty against corruption.
so it's also kasama na rin yung tinatawag na committee.
Yes.
No?
Yes, committee reciprocity,
Reciprocity,
ganyan.
committee. And kaya nga it's between the two countries to discuss. Kaya
negotiate.
ng sinabi nyo, you're saying that if the country really wants Zaldy Co back in the same way that they wanted Guo and Tevez back, they will exhaust all the means possible, all the ways necessary, whether it be administrative or judicial or yun nga, through committee, etc. And to convince the Czech Republic to allow him to be sent back to the Philippines. No? Ang siguro, partner,
Siguro we can
ang-
discuss that at the next
Yes.
open discussion natin, yung mga iba pang questions, no?
Yes, yes, yes.
So,
What-
thank you, attorneys. But up next, we'll be discussing the constitutional and human right limits of any repatriation strategy. Because however Zaldy Co is brought home, he remains in the eyes of the law entitled to due process. You're watching Abogado.
After months in hiding, a fugitive is finally in custody. Former Ako Bicol representative Elizalde Zaldy Co, arrested in Prague, thousands of miles from the tribunals waiting to try him. But arresting Zaldy Co is one thing, bringing him home is another. The Philippines has no extradition treaty with the Czech Republic. Reports suggest Co may hold a Portuguese passport and he still has the right to seek asylum. Is the answer deportation, extradition by committee, or the UN Convention Against Corruption? Tonight, we confront a question that tests the reach of Philippine law beyond its borders. Can the Philippines bring Zaldy Co home without an extradition treaty?
Welcome back and thanks for joining us. You're still watching Abogado. We now turn to the constitutional and human rights dimensions of the case, anchored in the guarantees of human dignity, due process, and respect for rights under the Constitution, as well as key international instruments like the ICCPR and the Refugee Convention.
This raises thorny issues of nationality, given reports of Co's alleged Portuguese passport, and asylum given his potential claim of political persecution under the Refugee Convention. And of course, he can also raise safety amid concerns over alleged death threats. Dean Taton, how should the Czech authorities and our own government navigate these three questions without handing the defense a political persecution narrative?
Yes, first thing is that Co is subject to the crimes against malversation and corruption. And while he is there under detention, he is entitled to due process under the ICCPR and even can look for the protection under asylum under the Refugee Convention as a concept. But we also have to look into the concept of nationality, which you earlier mentioned. No? So if he possesses his Portuguese passport and also a Philippine passport, although that is canceled, we always remember the concept of effective nationality principle, where the person is treated when he is in the third country or third state to have only one nationality, that which is where he is closely and genuinely connected. Dito, Pilipinas, kasi he is in fact a congressman in the Philippines, so he must be treated as a Filipino and not as a Portuguese person. And at the same time, he may be raising this legal protections under the Human Rights Conventions, Refugee Convention, so that he may not be returned to the Philippines under the non-refoulement, reforma, or whatever you pronounce that, under international law, kung saan hindi pwedeng ibalik si Zaldy Co dito sa Pilipinas kung sasabihin niya na may unfounded fear based on persecution on account of his political opinion against the current government, which the government of the Republic of the Philippines can always say also, and under the exclusionary rules na hindi pwedeng covered ang non-political offenses such as these crimes. He is currently considered as a fugitive from justice. But one thing is clear also, that there must be observance of due process here. Although we know that deportation process may not be entirely giving him that due process, pero hindi siya criminal in nature, no? Pero he still has a right under international law.
Thank you so much, Dean. Now, Attorney DJ, does a canceled Philippine passport affect citizenship? And given the alleged death threats, does the state have a positive duty to ensure Zaldy Co's safety and, of course, also his return?
Well, at the onset, cancellation of a passport merely translates into an undocumented alien insofar as a foreign government is concerned. He remains Filipino, and I agree with Dina. No? The closest nationality would really be Philippines because he was a former congressman. And as a signatory of the Human Rights Convention, I think the Philippines can simply ensure the Czech Republic that Zaldy Co's right to due process would strictly be observed. Unfortunately, in the EU, the call for due process compared probably to where Guo and Tebes were detained would be more difficult and more challenging. So this is where diplomacy comes into play. And I think the government should, by now, they should be negotiating with the Czech Republic. I do not know if ando na sila or they have sent any representative, but they have to act swiftly, I think.
Thank you so much, Attorney DJ. We now open the floor for another round of discussion. And I'd like to pick up from what Dean Taton was saying earlier. Yung sabi mong dapat merong genuine connection si Zaldy Co in terms of asking the state of Czech Republic to recognize yung, for example, yung Portuguese passport niya, kung sakali man meron talaga siya nun. And for all intents and purposes, you're arguing that he is a Filipino. In fact, he's a legislator here. So this can be something that falls under the Nottenbaum doctrine, requiring genuine connection between the individual and the state in this age of golden visa.
Yes,
So,
the
palagay nyo,
principle
hindi
of-
ba, hindi uubra yung Portuguese golden visa niya, assuming this is true?
Hindi obra because of the principle of effective nationality, no? And kung titingnan ang timelines ni Zaldy Co, no? In fact, sometime December or January, he even submitted in the Philippines a petition before the Supreme Court in relation to his TRO prayer, no? But it was denied. So in some reports, he was allegedly to be in Sweden, where the document was apostilled, no? So, mean to say, Filipino pa siya at that time, December, January, and then, although we are uncertain kung nasaan siya on this period of January until April, but I was thinking also that maybe expired visa also as appearing in the passport. Kasi kung meron man siyang Philippine passport during that time, maybe because it was not tiered or it was not stamped or something na canceled. So siguro he can present that as sa border lang naman, 'di ba? Hindi naman siya makikita. But obviously baka nag-expire din yung passport niya. That's why I mean the expired ang visa niya.
You know, partner, I'm glad you raised the Nottingham case, no? Because that was decided by the International Court of Justice, ICJ, I think, way back in 1951. And I think the principle still holds true, no? There must be a genuine connection. Now, doon naman, maybe I'll address this to you, Attorney DJ. Dito naman sa ano, how about on the, what would you think should be the evidentiary threshold for a well-founded fear of prosecution? The persecution, the defense.
In favor of Zaldy Co?
Yes.
Other than bare pronouncements, I don't think there is any because at the end of the day, our courts of law are the ones who are handling this. So how can you argue against those pieces of evidence? So it's really, really very difficult. No? Other than the fact that he is a politician and that this is something that is political in nature, but easily the documents will speak for themselves.
Can he raise this particular argument? The Philippine justice system does not work. I will never get justice there.
He will always say that, but well, unfortunately, because Digong is presently in The Hague, he can probably even make use of that argument.
But the justice system in the
yes,
Philippines
of course.
does not
So
work. Okay.
that's why, again, diplomacy is very important and a swift action on the part of the government.
But I think it will not work. I mean, that argument of the justice system doesn't work. Although he would say na if the threshold is simply unfounded fear unfounded fear, which is subjective as to him, na he feels that there is persecution because of his videos released, no? So that would basically also run, pero it's also countered by the government.
I have a question just because we saw how being in the Interpol Red Notice was used by our government to cooperate when it came to us arresting former President Rodrigo Duterte, since na-mention na ni Attorney DJ yung pagiging imprisoned niya ngayon sa The Hague. Can the government again use diplomatic channels and raise yung Interpol Red Notice? I think there were efforts to put Zaldy Co in the Interpol Red Notice.
Kasi there's supposed to be a treaty.
Yeah, but the Interpol-
have the Philippine government take Zaldy home back through a private jet as well, in the same day that they brought
yes.
President Duterte to The Hague by private jet.
Interpol kasi is not a law enforcement agency, theoretically. No? It only
coordinates.
is committed to coordinate, inform the whereabouts of a person subject of a warrant. So I think to a very limited extent, they could, but at the end of the day, it has to either go through administrative deportation or pwede yung executive agreement or under the principle of committee.
But I think maganda ding umpisa ang red notice, daw. Kasi ang red notice naman, even after the arrest pa din niyang i-file ng Philippines kung hindi man siya nakapag-file before. So this would also help us go to the starting point of negotiating for the possible return of this person, taking away extradition and the deportation routes.
Okay, thank you so much, attorneys. When we return, closing reflections on our central question: can the Philippines bring Zaldy Co home without an extradition treaty? This is Abogado.
After months in hiding, a fugitive is finally in custody. Former ACO Bicol representative Elizalde Zaldy Co, arrested in Prague, thousands of miles from the tribunals waiting to try him. But arresting Zaldy Co is one thing, bringing him home is another. The Philippines has no extradition treaty with the Czech Republic. Reports suggest Co may hold a Portuguese passport and he still has the right to seek asylum. Is the answer deportation, extradition by committee, or the UN Convention Against Corruption? Tonight, we confront a question that tests the reach of Philippine law beyond its borders. Can the Philippines bring Zaldy Co home without an extradition treaty?
Welcome back and thanks for joining us. You're still watching Abogado. Now from deportation and extradition to the UNCAC, Interpol, asylum and citizenship, the Co case has surfaced. Nearly every major doctrine of public international law we thought was settled, especially when I was still in law school.
Ako, matagal na yun. At its core, the question is no longer only whether Zaldy Co will come home, but how, and what that choice will say about our system. We now ask for closing reflections. Dean Taton, your final statement.
Bringing him home is very real. And I think that the Philippines should really be forcing its efforts to bring him on the route of diplomatic negotiations so that we can bring Zaldy home in a more expeditious manner, but of course with the observance of all the legal processes and of course human rights here.
And how about you, Attorney DJ?
Zaldy Co is a billionario, but despite that, I think the government should and must bring him home. He will be able to answer so many questions, and if the government would be successful, this is going to be double hit for the Marcos administration, assuming that the president will be out of the picture.
So that's the battle cry, no? Bring him home.
Yeah.
Bring him home.
Our thanks to Dean Rodel Taton and Attorney DJ Jimenez for breaking down the complexities of cross-border accountability, even without the usual map.
Because in the end, bringing a fugitive home is not just a test of diplomacy. It is a test of whether we can prosecute corruption without bending the rights that make prosecution legitimate in the first place?
And in a democracy, how we bring someone to justice matters just as much as whether we do. This is Abogado. Good night.